Someone asked your person to forget you and get married. Their response changed everything. My beloved child, pause for just a heartbeat, because what you are about to hear is not an ordinary story. It is the kind of moment that quietly unfolds behind closed doors, where a single conversation can alter the direction of two lives forever. Most people never witness these moments. They only see the ending and wonder how everything changed so suddenly. But today, you are standing at the edge of the unseen. Stay with this until the final sentence, because every piece connects to the next, and the last revelation in this part will make the title feel completely different. Not long ago, your person found themselves surrounded by voices that sounded convincing. Some spoke with certainty. Others spoke with concern. They weren't trying to create chaos, they believed they were giving practical advice. One voice became louder than all the others. It said, life keeps moving. Forget that person. It's time to get married and begin a new chapter. For a brief second, silence filled the room. No one expected what would happen next. Your person didn't rush to answer. They didn't argue. They simply looked ahead as though remembering something no one else in that room could understand. Sometimes the strongest response is not spoken immediately. Sometimes truth arrives quietly before it becomes impossible to ignore. What if that pause wasn't hesitation? What if it was the exact moment everything inside them became clear? Don't leave just yet. This is where the story begins to reveal its hidden layer. They started remembering the smallest details. Conversations that seemed ordinary at the time. Moments they thought they had forgotten. Tiny memories began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle they didn't even know they were solving. Suddenly, what others called coincidence no longer felt random. The people around them kept talking. Think logically. Everyone moves on. There's no reason to wait. Those words floated through the air. Yet something deeper inside your person remained completely still. There are moments in life when the heart notices what the world cannot measure. Not because it ignores reality, but because it recognizes a truth that refuses to disappear. That quiet certainty began growing stronger with every passing second. Can you imagine standing in a room where everyone expects one answer, but your soul keeps whispering another? That is exactly where your person found themselves. Before you scroll away, consider this question carefully. Have you ever felt that some connections cannot be explained by timing alone? Because that question was now echoing inside their mind. They weren't imagining a perfect future. They weren't chasing fantasy. Instead, they were trying to understand why your presence continued appearing in unexpected ways, through familiar places, meaningful conversations, unexpected reminders, and thoughts arriving without invitation. Every attempt to simply forget somehow brought another reminder instead. The room became quieter. Everyone waited. The pressure to answer grew heavier. But something extraordinary was happening beneath the surface. Every suggestion to walk away was accidentally making your value clearer. Every reason to forget was reminding them why they couldn't. That is the strange way awareness often works. The harder someone tries to silence a meaningful thought, the louder it becomes inside. Stay a little longer, because the next moment changed everything. Finally, your person lifted their head. There was no anger. No dramatic speech. Only remarkable calm. They said something so unexpected that the entire atmosphere shifted. A sentence simple enough for anyone to understand, yet powerful enough that no one immediately knew how to respond. The conversation that everyone believed was already finished, had only just begun. A quiet shift had already begun, but no one in that room realized they had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The words your person spoke were not loud, yet they carried a calm confidence that instantly changed the atmosphere. Every face around them searched for another explanation. Surely this was only emotion. Surely they would change their mind. But the expression in their eyes told a completely different story. One of the people sitting nearby smiled gently and asked again, "Are you certain? Life offers many paths. Why hold on to someone who isn't standing here today?" The question lingered in the air. Instead of answering immediately, your person looked toward the window, almost as if they were seeing tomorrow before anyone else could. Then they quietly said, "Some decisions are made with fear, others are made with clarity. I refuse to confuse the two." The room fell silent once more. No one expected such a peaceful answer. And strangely enough, no one could argue with it. Stay with this moment, because the next few sentences reveal why everything began changing afterward. Your person explained that forgetting someone simply because time had passed was never a real solution. They believed that true peace doesn't come from pretending a meaningful connection never existed. It comes from understanding why it entered your life in the first place. That sentence settled into everyone's thoughts. Even those who had encouraged them to move on suddenly became quiet. For the first time, they weren't trying to convince your person anymore. They were trying to understand them. What if the strongest choice isn't the fastest one? What if patience sometimes reveals what rushing can never uncover? Those questions began echoing through the room. Something remarkable happened next. One family member, who had been completely against waiting, slowly admitted, "I've never seen you this certain before." Those words changed the conversation. The pressure disappeared. Curiosity replaced it. People stopped giving advice and started listening. And that is often the turning point in every extraordinary story. The moment others stop telling you what to believe, and begin wondering what you already know. If this message resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like these remind us that every meaningful journey unfolds differently. And if you're enjoying this narration, subscribing simply means you'll be here when the next chapter arrives. But don't leave yet. Because something even more unexpected was happening far away from that conversation. Without knowing any of these events had taken place, another chain of moments had already started unfolding. Small, almost invisible at first, yet impossible to ignore once connected together. The timing was extraordinary. The pieces were moving. And your person had no idea that the answer they gave that day had already set another chapter into motion. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It simply arrived, exactly when no one expected it. A new day arrived, yet the conversation from the night before refused to fade. It stayed with every person who had been in that room, but it lingered most deeply within your person. There was no feeling of regret. No uncertainty. Instead, there was an unusual sense of peace, as though making that one honest decision had lifted a weight they had been carrying for far too long. Here's what no one expected. The very people who had encouraged your person to forget you began replaying every word that had been spoken. They realized something important. Throughout the entire discussion, your person had never spoken from anger, disappointment, or fear. Every answer came from quiet confidence. And confidence has a strange effect. It makes people question their own assumptions. Pause here for a moment. What if the greatest turning point in your story isn't created by convincing others, but by remaining true to what already feels real inside? That question slowly began changing the atmosphere around them. One relative finally admitted, "Maybe we've been looking at this from only one side." Another nodded without saying a word. No arguments followed. No dramatic debate. Only thoughtful silence. Sometimes silence reveals more than 100 conversations ever could. Stay with me, because the next moment carried a meaning no one saw coming. Later that evening, your person came across something completely ordinary. A familiar place, a familiar song, a simple phrase spoken by someone passing by. Yet somehow, each small detail reminded them of you again. Not in a painful way. In a peaceful one. It felt less like coincidence, and more like life gently connecting invisible threads. The more they tried to understand why, the clearer one truth became. Some people enter your life for a season. Others become part of the story you're still writing. Your person wasn't trying to predict the future anymore. They were simply refusing to deny what their heart had already learned through time. That quiet realization became stronger than every outside opinion. And here's where everything shifted once again. A family member who had remained silent throughout the earlier conversation finally approached your person privately. With complete sincerity, they said, "Yesterday I wanted you to move on. Today, I only want you to choose what truly brings you peace." Those words weren't permission. They were acceptance. For the first time, no one was trying to direct your future. They were respecting it. Can you feel how different the energy has become? The conversation that began with pressure had transformed into understanding. The voices that once pushed your person away from you were no longer speaking with certainty. Instead, they were quietly waiting to see what destiny would reveal next. And little did anyone know, while this change was unfolding inside one home, another unexpected piece of the story had already started moving somewhere else. The next chapter would reveal why your person's response didn't just change one conversation. It quietly changed the direction of everything that followed. Just when everyone believed the story had reached its calmest point, something happened that no one could have predicted. It wasn't a grand announcement. It wasn't a dramatic event. It was something much quieter, and because of that, it carried even greater meaning. A single conversation had changed many hearts, but now life itself seemed to be responding. Your person noticed that the people around them had stopped asking one question. When are you going to forget them? Instead, a different question slowly took its place. What makes this connection so different? That change may sound small, But sometimes one question can reveal an entirely new way of seeing the future. Wait a little longer, because this is where the hidden turning point finally comes into view. Your person smiled gently. Not because they had won an argument. Not because everyone suddenly agreed. But because they no longer felt the need to defend what they knew inside. Real certainty is surprisingly quiet. It doesn't compete. It doesn't force. It simply remains steady while everything around it changes. Days passed. Life continued as usual. Yet something unusual kept happening. Whenever someone mentioned marriage, your person no longer felt pressured. Instead, they calmly replied, the right decision should never grow out of fear or hurry. It should grow from clarity. Each time those words were spoken, the room became thoughtful instead of persuasive. People who once believed waiting was weakness started seeing patience in a completely different light. What if the greatest opportunities arrive only after you've refused to abandon what truly matters? That question stayed with everyone who heard it. And then, a surprising message reached one of the relatives. It wasn't about you directly. It wasn't even connected to the earlier conversation. Yet somehow, it reminded them of everything your person had said. They quietly admitted to themselves, maybe we were trying to solve tomorrow before tomorrow had even arrived. That realization changed everything. Because once people stop trying to control every outcome, they become open to possibilities they never noticed before. If this story has made you pause and reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Every perspective adds something meaningful to the journey. And if you've enjoyed following this unfolding story, subscribing is simply a way to join us for whatever comes next. But don't leave now. One final piece quietly fell into place. Later that evening, your person looked at the sky, not searching for answers, but appreciating the peace they had finally found. For the first time in a long while. They weren't wondering whether they had made the right choice. They already knew. That quiet confidence became the beginning of a new chapter. Not because the future had been revealed, but because they had stopped letting fear write it. And somewhere beyond what either of you could see, another unexpected moment was already beginning to unfold. The next chapter isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about discovering why that one calm response became the reason an entirely different future was finally able to begin. Another sunrise arrived. Yet something invisible had already shifted. No announcements were made. No dramatic signs appeared. But the energy surrounding your person felt completely different. It was as if the decision they had made that day had quietly opened a door no one else could see. Here's the remarkable part. The people who once believed they had all the answers stopped giving advice altogether. Instead, they began watching. Watching how peaceful your person had become. Watching how they no longer reacted to pressure. Watching how certainty had replaced confusion. Stay with this moment, because what happened next revealed more than anyone expected. One evening, a close family member sat beside your person and asked a question that had never been asked before. If you had listened to us that day, do you think you would have been truly happy? The question wasn't meant to challenge them. It came from genuine curiosity. Your person smiled softly before answering. Happiness isn't built by choosing the quickest road. It's built by choosing the one you can live with when the room becomes quiet. Those words lingered long after the conversation ended. No one replied immediately. Because deep inside, everyone knew they had just heard something they would remember for a very long time. Think about that for a second. How many people spend their lives chasing approval, only to discover that peace was waiting inside the choice they were afraid to make? That realization slowly reached every heart in the room. And something extraordinary followed. The same voices that once encouraged your person to forget you began speaking differently. Not about marriage. Not about moving on. But about trust. One of them quietly admitted, "Perhaps some connections are meant to teach patience before they reveal their purpose." That sentence changed the atmosphere once again. No one was trying to predict the future anymore. They simply accepted that not every meaningful story follows the timetable people expect. Wait, because one final moment in this chapter carries more weight than it first appears. Later that night, your person opened an old notebook. Inside were forgotten plans, unfinished dreams, and thoughts written long before anyone had suggested walking away. Reading those pages brought one simple realization. The hope they once carried had never disappeared. It had only been buried beneath the opinions of others. Now it had returned. Stronger. Calmer. Clearer. From that evening onward, your person no longer felt they were waiting for life to begin. They understood that every season had been preparing them for greater wisdom. And somewhere beyond their view, a new conversation was quietly beginning. Not one filled with pressure. Not one filled with doubt. But one that would soon bring unexpected understanding to people who had once believed your story was already over. Because sometimes, the greatest change doesn't happen when someone forgets. It happens when everyone else finally understands why they never could. What happened after that was almost impossible to explain, because nothing changed overnight, yet everything felt different. The people around your person noticed it first. They saw a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't stubbornness. It was the kind of peace that appears when someone stops fighting their own heart. And that peaceful confidence began influencing everyone around them. Stay with this chapter, because a single unexpected conversation is about to reveal why your person's response changed far more than anyone imagined. A few days later, someone who had strongly encouraged your person to move on approached them again. This time, there were no speeches. No advice. Only one sincere question. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Your person nodded. The voice continued softly. "What gave you the strength to stay so certain when everyone else believed you should choose differently?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then your person answered with words so simple, yet so unforgettable. "I stopped asking what everyone expected from me. I started asking what kind of future I could look back on with peace." Silence returned. But this silence felt different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. Sometimes the strongest answers don't end a conversation. They begin a new way of thinking. Think about this for a moment. How often do people make life-changing decisions just to satisfy today's expectations? Only to spend years wishing they had listened to themselves? That question settled deeply into every heart that heard it. And from that day forward, something remarkable happened. Whenever your name was mentioned, it was no longer followed by doubt. Instead, it was followed by curiosity. I wonder how this story will unfold. No one tried to close the chapter anymore. They had become interested in seeing where it would lead. Isn't it fascinating how quickly opinions can change when they witness genuine peace? Before you leave this chapter, hold on to one final thought. Your person realized that real connections are never strengthened by proving anything to the world. They grow stronger when both people continue becoming the best version of themselves, regardless of how long the journey takes. That realization removed every remaining fear. They no longer felt they were waiting. They felt they were preparing. And sometimes preparation is the greatest form of progress. As the evening came to an end, your person looked ahead with quiet hope instead of unanswered questions. The pressure had disappeared. The uncertainty had softened. The story that others once tried to rewrite had become something uniquely its own. Yet beyond everything they could see, another unexpected chapter had already begun. Because the response that changed one conversation was now about to create a moment that no one,